You are listening to the Small Town Big Arts podcast. I'm your host, Geoffrey Kershner, the CEO of the Academy Center of the Arts in Lynchburg, Virginia. In my own work as an arts leader, I have found it difficult to access resources for arts organizations and artists serving smaller communities. On each episode, Small Town Big Arts sets out to drive conversations and provide inspiration for those serving smaller communities through the arts. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us and share with your friends and colleagues who are working to promote the arts in smaller communities across America. You can also learn more by visiting us at smalltownbigarts.com. This month on Small Town Big Arts, I'm sharing another small town podcast called Small Town Secret Sauce, produced by Barton Quigley. Bart has moved to small town Lynchburg, Virginia from San Francisco, California, and is sharing stories of what makes small town life special. In episode 16, he interviews me about the Academy Center of the Arts, where I am the CEO, and we talk about how we do what we do and why we do it. Make sure to follow and listen to Bart's podcast after you listen. Information and links can be found in the show notes. Thank you and enjoy.
Jeff, thank you so much for jumping on this show. As I was saying before we started rolling, that you are, and what you do with the Academy and you as an individual are part of the fabric of why we chose Lynchburg to be the place that we wanted to go to scale down from a crazy, wild, big diverse city like San Francisco into a place that, because we wanted to jump into community, be a part of that, get to know our neighbors, but we also didn't want to 100% sacrifice arts and culture. And certainly some of the arts and culture that we were enjoying in San Francisco, which, like I said, is out there. It's not just the buttoned up stuff. So during the research, I discovered the Academy. And first of all, what a gorgeous, beautiful theater. I would like to get into some of the history about that. Like, what a gem right here on Main Street.
Yeah.
And we saw that there was things like theater and symphony and ballet and holiday specials, right? Like all kinds of wholesome small town stuff. And then there was one post that I was scrolling past and I was like, let me back up to that. I was like, drag story time. Okay, because we had already discovered that there was a drag element here, which was very important to us. But they were at like restaurants or bars or things like that.
Sure.
But to be here on a main stage really caught my attention. And already I was like, oh, I wonder how this is going over.
Sure.
But so pleased with that bravery to do that. But it was then a subsequent post later on, and I'm not sure how far it was, if it was a day or two, because I think I'd already seen like 2 drag story times being posted. And I didn't go digging into comments. I don't do things like that. But then I did see this post basically defending the decision to put this out there. And with so much of the national rhetoric focusing on things like drag story time,
Sure.
I was like, bravo. So what that spoke to a lot of inclusivity. You talked about the mission statement and what your approach is. That's when we fell in love. I was like, okay, these people have their heart in the right place.
That's flattering. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. No, I mean literally we were just like, okay, there is somebody speaking up for everybody.
Yeah.
So I want to start with the word inclusive and inclusivity. It seems to be a part of your DNA.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that part of your personal vision for the Academy, or is it a collective? How did that become infused?
I mean, I think it's a collective now. I've been here for 9 years, so I think my hopes for the organization and what I think the organization should do and be for a community is pretty well established at this point. Like, I think it's not. I was just commenting to another leader on the staff the other day. There was a question about how we worded or talked about subsidized programs we do versus programs that we do that have earned revenue sources. And there was a period early going when I was here, and the same leader was also here with me, where we had to use some specific language and talk internally about it in a very different way, because we had to kind of rewire the culture in and around this idea that the organization was here for public good and community health, and which was different than the way it had been operated prior. So, but I definitely came in with an idea of what I thought it should be and what I wanted it to be. And that can be scary at times, I think, in a smaller community, and certainly in a community that has an association with a large evangelical university. So But I grew up in a county outside of here in Amherst County, but I grew up on the Sweetbriar College campus. So I had this very interesting childhood in that I spent a lot of time in this, what I would kind of call a liberal bubble that existed on the college campus. And with my family too, constantly listening to NPR and, traveling, up for, Clinton's inauguration and, all the things that we did. And my mother is a member of the NAACP and, and all these things. And at the same time, I was going to school in the public schools there in Amherst County. And so I had a real sense too of the larger community that was around me. So it wasn't like I was completely secluded from it. And I also come from a mixed race background, so I grew up with a Japanese grandmother in the house, and so which was very different at that time in Amherst County. I think I knew one other mixed Asian that I grew up with at that time, and so it put me in a place where I had I think a very unique perspective, both on my own worldview and my family's worldview, along with the value that the greater community had outside of what maybe a talking point would be about rural America, which I think is a really problematic way that I think rural America is framed really poorly by mainstream media. And I think it's causing part of the problems that we exist with today. So.
Oh, absolutely. When they talk about, like flyover states. Yeah. And that these people feel, marginalized, that it's all about the big cities. Yeah. And so, and like I said, when we were talking earlier, we wanted to come to a place of mixed opinion because I think it's very beneficial for everybody. Yeah. Right? I don't believe that there's one set and you're good for life. I think it's a constant evolution of thought, ideas, and re-examining what's possible, but being able to do so in community and in conversation with others, I think is huge. You said growing up on the Sweetbriar campus. What does that mean?
So the way that Sweetbriar works is that it's a huge amount of property. It was an old plantation, which has its own. As I got older too, sort of learning about that history was another interesting dynamic for me. But it is a massive plot of land. It is absolutely beautiful. And one of the things that Sweetbriar does, because it's in a rural area, is that a lot of faculty and staff live on campus. Okay. Even people can own their homes on the campus. They don't own the land, but they own the houses. I didn't grow up on the campus, but I grew up on a street that connected to the campus, and the street was even called Briarhurst, which is a combination of Sweetbriar and Amherst.
Oh, interesting.
And my closest friends lived on the campus. And so I would ride my bike to campus every day. We had lakes, we had pools, we had a gym, we had soccer fields. And so my childhood was, we moved here when I was 9, but most of my childhood was this picturesque campus that was my playground.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Where did you move here from?
So we moved here from Montana.
Okay.
But before that, we lived in Los Angeles. My dad was a theater professor. He's retired now, and he was the theater professor and head of the performing arts division at Sweetbriar. So I even came to this theater before it opened and walked into it with my dad maybe I was 12 or something, because Dad got involved in some of the efforts to save this in the 90s. So I have an interesting personal story arc with the building, and my dad is still here. He spends every Tuesday here. He is working on our archives.
Oh, cool.
And so we have an archive room that we've created, and he meets with a group of volunteers every Tuesday, and they organize things by year, and they're going through and. Our history isn't just the theater, but it's also a fine arts center that existed in between.
Okay.
That was torn down, and it was a merge. We're a product of a merger. So Dad also is going through production photos and getting people's names, and then we're also filing away the current moment too.
That's cool. Yeah. What else is involved in the art? Is it just photos, or are there things like playbills and things like that?
Yeah, it's playbills, articles, a lot of fun stuff. And then Dad sends around to the staff every Tuesday from the archives, and it's something from the archives. So one of the things just anecdotally, like one of the ones I loved the other day was it used to be that there was a bar across the street when the theater was operating in the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
And it was called Happy Billy's. And
oh my God.
there was no bar in the theater, so people would go across the street at intermission to get a drink, and then there was a bell that had some sort of way that they would ring the bell to sort of alert everybody that it was time to go back to the theater, and then they would cross the street and come back into the theater. And so he sent around an ad for Happy Billy's that was in the playbill. So people love it. It's a lot of fun, and we see these old programs, old pictures, and it helps us understand, I think, and connect to the past here, which is actually really helpful for understanding the present too.
Oh yes, absolutely. Has there been any talk or ideas of taking all of this stuff and doing any sort of like documentary or exhibit or virtual exhibit? Because it seems like a wealth of content that would be really cool for locals and visitors alike.
Yeah, so we are actually, I know on the schedule, I can't remember when, but there is on the schedule, the gallery is actually going to be turned over at one point to Dad, and they're going to hang a lot of the archival pieces that they've found that are most interesting. And so, yeah, there is going to be a show. And they're scanning a lot of things digitally, so I imagine eventually, we'll have a big, pretty clear digital resource that we can access if we want to do that. One of the things I love, and speaking of small communities, is that these things exist right in towns all across America, and it is an interesting window into these community ecosystems and community history, and we, and so it is even a window into ours is a window into others too, in many ways.
Well, that I think that ties into you. You also do your own podcast.
I do.
Small Town Big Arts.
I do. Yeah, Small Town Big Arts.
So art seems to be woven into your family, your past. We talked a bit about the inclusivity with what you do here. What is your mission to do for the podcast that you're doing? What is your hope to do it? And describe that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 18, I was deciding where to go to college, and my primary requirement for my college was that it needed to be in the center of a major city because I grew up here, and we visited urban cores a lot because of the nature of my dad. And so, we London and New York regularly, and we were subscribers of the Kennedy Center. So I was well versed and cultured, but I had this taste of this thing that I felt I really needed and wanted. So I ended up in Philadelphia at a conservatory in downtown Philly, and I lived in Philly for 7.5 years before going to graduate school. And in that time in Philadelphia, I was really wired to think, and I was a theater artist at the time, and I was really wired to really believe that really nothing existed south of Washington, D.C., and if you were going to do this as a career, it was a wasteland, outside of any of these large cities up and down the East Coast, and obviously the West Coast and other major markets. But so I ended up going the journey through graduate school. I won't get into high detail about, but I ended up in Tallahassee at Florida State University, and being in Tallahassee was really helpful for me because I think it kind of opened my eyes to, every community needs the arts. Every community needs to participate in it. They need to view it. They need to see it. And it exists everywhere. It's all over the place. And it pops up in lots of interesting, unique ways. And that created a starting place for me where I thought, I don't need to be in a major market to do this. And we can explore different things, different places we could go. And so a collective of us from Florida State ended up initially setting up in Charlottesville because I had identified Central Virginia as a region that we might want to think about doing our artwork. And then eventually gravity kind of pulled us over here because my family was closer and we had resources here and connectivity to some of the community, and started a summer theater festival on the Super Art College campus. And we ran that for about a decade. and the company that we started still exists, but and is now moved here to Lynchburg. But
and that's End Station.
It's End Station. That's right. So through that time, I really had to figure out how to develop and create work for a smaller community, and it's really hard. In order to succeed, you have to be wired in, and you have to care about where you live, and you have to care about the people that are around you. And I think that it helped me fall in love with where I grew up, and I did not love where I grew up before I started creating artwork for it. And I think that love that began to form, I think then got me to think about how we talk about the arts in America and the resources that exist for the arts. Most of it comes from major markets. Most of the major foundations are in major markets. A lot of the thought leaders are in major markets. And I just was, I've always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I won't lie about that. And I took a sabbatical after COVID, and I could get into that too. We wanted to talk about it, but
please hold on.
Yeah,
please describe a sabbatical. Where were you in your career, in your life? What were you still in school? Were you working? Because I associate sabbatical with like I'm working and I need time off.
Right.
But it's just time off. So what was your path like at that point when you took the sabbatical, and why did you take it?
So the sabbatical was after COVID. I had been here at the Academy for about 7 years.
Okay.
And we had weathered COVID. We'd gotten through it. And it was twofold. One part of it was that I personally needed it. I had gone through, when I came here to the organization, it was a quarter of the size it is now.
Oh, wow.
And we hadn't built the theater yet. And so during my time, we completed the fundraising, we completed opening the theater, we ran the theater for a year.
Wow.
And then a pandemic hit, and then we navigated that. And I was just done. I was toast. And it was either take a sabbatical or probably leave.
Wow.
And so we used the sabbatical to also redo the org chart, and we created a flatter organization through my sabbatical. So we brought in a friend of mine who was a consultant out of Richmond who helped us develop this, and it was successful. We created a C-suite underneath me with 3 leaders who now in many ways run large portions of the organization. My job is very different than it was 2 years ago. So it's much more manageable now. I have time to think about strategy, long-term trajectory for the organization, and do things like Small Town Big Arts as a podcast project.
Yeah. Was that born out of the sabbatical?
It was. So
Okay.
I came to the end of the sabbatical, and I was like, man, I really probably should come back with something. And I wasn't I wasn't
To like prove yourself?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This was a good idea.
The consultant really said, like, don't do that. Don't feel like you need to do that. Because the whole point of the sabbatical was not like an academic sabbatical where you're supposed to write a paper or publish something. It wasn't that. It was really about retaining a CEO and establishing a better system for working. And so the whole idea was to unplug. Nobody was allowed to contact me. It was a no-contact sabbatical, so nobody could speak to me or talk to me during work. It was work-related.
Was there
from work?
Any back doors for extreme emergencies?
Yes, we did have a real comprehensive plan, and there was a circumstance in which they did contact me because a thing happened. We talked about like a death or something, and so one of our leaders' father died, and so they did contact me at that point.
Okay,
and I was able to reach out. But there was a major thing that happened. We canceled a major outdoor concert series while I was gone, and I did not make that decision. I supported the decision, would have done the same thing, but they had to do that by themselves, and they learned a ton during that time. So I felt like I was coming back, and I hadn't worked for 3 months. I felt like I needed to show something. So as a last minute thing, during the sabbatical, 2 things happened. One, a small town organization called Second Stage, which is in the town of Amherst, which is there was an old abandoned church that they converted into a community arts center. And a colleague friend of mine who used to be the executive director of the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, she took it on as a project in retirement and asked me if I would come and facilitate a strategic planning process for them while I was on sabbatical. And I was like, sure, yeah, I can do that for you guys. And so I went out there, And while I was helping them, I just was like, man, there's nothing available to help people in small communities that I can find easily. They're delivering the arts. And so I thought, there's probably an opportunity here to create a resource for small community arts delivery. And I think I'm probably well positioned, and this sounds silly, but there's this Beastie Boys line that's be true to yourself and you will never fall.
Oh yes.
And if you know that. And I have always, that's always rung true for me, and I found over and over again in my life at points when, particularly because I think I'm drawn to a lot of art that comes out of urban areas. I'm a big hip hop head, so, and all of that artwork comes from urban environments. I'm very drawn to it, but at the same time, I have to be who I am. And so I think part of this too is like, yeah, you know what? I am a guy from a small town, and I am a person who leads an organization in a small town. So rather than feeling like I'm less than or have something to prove to the major markets, which would be very easy to do, I thought, you know what? No, there is expertise and information that I can provide here in regards to smaller communities. And I had a resource of a lot of peers in the field through time with National Art Strategies and Americans for the Arts. So I just got on the phone. I started calling people and saying, hey, listen, can I talk to you about your organization in Sitka, Alaska? Can I talk to you about your organization in the farmlands of Wisconsin? Can I talk to you about your organization in the mountains of Kentucky? And and these were folks I knew, and they were willing to talk to me. And since then, I have continued to kind of expand it. I'm starting to see trends that pop up over and over again in regards to why certain organizations are successful in small communities, as well as what the communities need to do or what they need to have in order to have an arts vibrant community.
Two things on that. One, I'm going to be doing a show called like Things I've Learned from my first smattering of guests.
Yeah.
Everyone who feels happy, successful, competent talks about authenticity. That has rang true for every single guest. And it is something that in my private life coaching practice, I'm always hammering on. Be your authentic self. That is the right choice.
Yeah.
So did the podcast, and I want to get back to some of the mechanics when we talk about how small communities can deliver arts, because I want to see, for the listeners, for myself, understand what that looks like.
Yeah.
But as far as the podcast and authenticity, was that because you talked about, like, I am from a small town. I do operate in a small town. Was doing that podcast, did that help you really kind of solidify that, no, I just need to be exactly who I am?
100%. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's 100% been that. And it's what I have to offer, when I think about it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's well, with all the national dialogue and everything else, everybody would just be their authentic self and express that and not hide it. It's all that inner manipulation that just torments us, and it honestly makes things a hell of a lot harder.
Yeah.
So, all right. So some of these mechanics, because I wrote down, you're talking about like there's challenges in small town of delivering arts. What do we mean delivering arts? Like putting on a theater performance, having a gallery. What exactly were you seeing? Define that for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the above. I think it's somewhat subjective. It's also different cultures identify things in different ways. I mean, I think one of the things that I've found, one of the types of organizations that I've kind of identified works well in smaller communities is what I call the torchbearer. So these are organizations that are somehow maintaining and celebrating some sort of traditional art form that exists from their region. And so in Mississippi, for example, there's a blues trail, and it stops at lots of locations that are in rural Mississippi that are like the B.B. King Museum and things like that. And this is rural small town Mississippi. I don't think you might, if you talk to a community member there, they may or may not. I think they would definitely identify that it was the arts, probably, but I don't know that they would necessarily think of it in the terms of like how I think of it as a professional arts administrator, where I'm like, oh yeah, this is we're delivering the arts through this 501c3 nonprofit.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I mean, I think these are 501c3s, but I think that how they kind of look at it in terms of whether it's something from the outside or something coming from the inside, I think is maybe one of the distinguishing factors of how we can kind of brand something the arts. I think it really is probably about, I think for the outside, there are clear things that you would sort of identify as the arts. And that's probably more what I'm kind of speaking to.
Okay.
Because I think that sometimes internally, communities may not necessarily go, yeah, that's just what we do. We have the blues. That's who we are. It's
right.
Blues and
right.
It's as much as like barbecue or anything else, right? It's just who we are, is what we got. We don't think about it as something that is it's the water we swim in.
Sure.
So I think for the outsider or for somebody from another small community can begin to figure out what theirs is, right? What do we have that maybe is our tradition or something we should be celebrating or embracing or looking at. They need to kind of see, in these other communities, they're doing this or doing that. So I think I would define it in whatever is a means of expression that finds its way into some sort of deliverable format. So
yeah,
it could be visual arts, it could be crafts, it could be folk music. It could be also places that are bringing outside artists in, because that's another thing that you see very often. I call that the enclave. So these are really beautiful, unique places where urbanites have discovered it.
Yeah.
And in that there is, and it's only successful when they fully embrace and integrate themselves into that community. And that's the only way it works. It doesn't work if you're just there to bestow your great urban knowledge upon them.
Right.
That doesn't work.
No. So something was coming up for me as you were talking about that, because it's like you were saying like the blues. It's like it's just the water we swim in. Maybe get slim. But there seems to be something that I'm picking up on that you see a power in, kind of really embodying that expression, that it is much more valuable than just the water you swim in, and that's through celebrating that you're inviting other people to elevate their experience with the community, with themselves. Mm-hmm. Do you see, because I'm getting the word power, do you see a lot of power in taking that kind of ownership and celebrating it?
Yeah, culture is 100% power. Just talking about hip hop earlier, right? If I use that as an example, one of the things I love about hip hop is that, a lot of what hip hop was, the stories that hip hop was telling are really traumatic, difficult stories. But there is an embracing of who we are, where we come from, and there's power in that. And I think the same is true for rural communities. I think that in the current moment, you can feel diminished, less than, not important. But you have, any community has a rich tapestry of history and stories and traditional art forms. And people do care about it from the outside. And going back to authenticity, I think people also know when something's authentic.
Oh, yeah.
People travel to places for authentic food. And I think that culture's the same. We have here in Virginia, we have this thing called the Crooked Road. And it is a celebration of mountain music, and it runs in Southwest Virginia, and it's similar to the Blues Trail, and you travel through and like visit the Carter family farm and things like that, and it's celebrating Southwest Virginia and what Southwest Virginia is and what it gave America, and I think there's a ton in that, and it's also successful because people want to feel proud of where they're from. And so if artists come into a community or exist in a community and celebrate that community, then people are going to they're going to grab onto that, they're going to hold on to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's, it's funny, when we were doing our research, I picked up on the fact that networking here in a smaller community is a lot easier.
Yeah.
So when I had reached out to the DLA account and I'd said, hey, crazy idea. Yeah. I'm from Virginia. We're thinking about moving to this town. Would you jump on the phone with me? And I got to talk to James. And I was just asking him all kinds of questions. And then I was just telling him like, oh my gosh, man, we've been researching this place. There's so much going on. There's da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I sent him, because we had created a vision board that was first with Post-its. and then we used a lot of like DLA photos and other people's photos, and then changed it to, oh no, here's the actual visual representation of Lynchburg. Like, we are sold. Yeah, and I sent it back to him. He was like, wow, man, you really make me appreciate my own hometown.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I know you did, actually. I mean, Ash talks about that quite a bit, actually. Your experience, what you saw, right? Which is really what DLA does, right? I mean, Downtown Lynchburg Association. If Ash was sitting there, she might or might not agree with me, but I think it's really a marketing company, right? It's a
sure.
It wants to tell the story, but it also wants to celebrate what it is and where it is, and that being effective with you all, was a huge victory for them. They love that story.
Oh yeah, she talked about it. No, she would agree with you on that. Yeah. That it is about sharing that, and that the power of that visual storytelling, which I think is really interesting that you both share that commonality in terms of the power of including the community and highlighting and celebrating, right? I mean, something I've learned through neuroscience, our brains are keenly wired to focus on the threat, the danger, what's missing, what's wrong. It does a terrible job of celebrating ourselves, right? Because if it's deemed safe, great, file it away. It doesn't care what's next, what's wrong.
Yeah, what's going to get me.
So for myself, and when I work with private clients, we talk all the time, like, I want you to create a hall of fame so you can go back and look and celebrate that. So I think it's really powerful what you guys do in separate roles, but also there's a lot of cross bleeding there.
Yeah, there is.
Well, I'm excited to see what's your vision for the Small Town Big Arts podcast. Like, you set out on this kind of one path, but as it's evolved, do you see different horizons?
I do. Yeah, it's not formulated in any kind of ton of specificity, but I think when I look at kind of next steps for myself, I think going back to this idea that I have a lot to sort of offer, I think that we have a huge part of the American population lives in small communities, and there are arts that exist all over those communities. And I think there's an opportunity to be a voice. And so I think I'm just trying to stay at it. I don't expect instantaneous success with it. But I figure if I keep at it, I think eventually it could become a large enough platform that it could really help a lot of these communities out and organizations in these communities. I also think there's an opportunity to have a dialogue with the larger arts administration ecosystem that I think can be. I don't even think it's not active dismissiveness. I just literally think it's just not even on the radar.
Oh sure, no, ignorance.
Yeah, it's just simply ignorance. So some of this is also like, hey, listen, like, there is actually a bunch of really fantastic work happening, and you're just not seeing it because we exist in these bubbles. And if while you're trying to figure out, and by the way, urban arts are in a real crisis moment. So while you're trying to figure this out, you're trying to source your solutions, your ways out. There may be a lot to be learned from these smaller communities and how they operate and how they work and how they and what they do. And there's a lot of really smart people doing really smart stuff and working really hard, but because you're locked into your sphere, you're not seeing it. So I think I would like to break through that a little bit. I would like to become a rural voice inside that echo chamber that just kind of rattles it a little bit. And I'm beginning to poke some holes in it with some national things. I'm started to be in a dialogue with SMU Data Arts, which is a research organization based out of SMU that does a ton of research in the field for arts leaders. And they do demographic study research. They look at the sort of financial structures of arts organizations, but they also do a thing called they do an arts vibrancy study that looks at every single jurisdiction in the United States, and they have a set of criteria that helps them deem something as arts vibrant. And it's a lot of different factors. It's the amount of arts organizations, the amount of arts dollars, the number of people employed full time by the arts. And they identify the top 10 most arts vibrant large market, mid market, and small market communities, and then they also do it by state. And now they're starting to do some rural research, and so I plugged into them now, and I'm in discussion with them. They've given me some of the early data that they haven't released yet, to look at some communities that are sort of outliers that don't really quite make sense with everything that we normally see with what makes something arts vibrant. For example, Jackson, Wyoming is the most arts vibrant small community. When we think about Jackson, well, it's pretty obvious why Jackson, right?
Sure.
It's wealthy.
Yeah.
Its population is also deceptive because those are the permanent residents, but Jackson obviously is community blows up every single time. It's ski season. So that all makes sense. But then there's communities that are really, really, I just talked to some folks in Woods County, Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
And
how big is that?
It is 5,000, I think.
Oh, wow.
And they don't make sense when you look at the data. And I called them and I found out what's going on. And there's a CDC that is there, Community Development Corporation, nonprofit, and the leader just saw during the 2008 housing crisis that the small communities that were doing okay tended to have arts communities. And so she was like, all right, this is what we're doing. And so she just started to create projects and invest in it. They're the mural capital of Oklahoma, and they have, all these different arts offerings. And so I'm taking that story back to SMU Data Arts, and I'm interviewing and looking at some other communities too, so we can kind of figure out what's happening in these communities.
That's cool.
And then, through that, maybe people will start listening to me, maybe, both as a resource, but also as to broaden. And this is a bigger, right? This is a bigger cultural conversation in America right now.
Of course.
I mean, it's just, I'm pretty progressive. But I definitely see how, the left is definitely a part of the story of why we are so divided.
Oh no, of course.
And I if this can be a little piece of trying to break through that a bit, an understanding of other communities and other people, I think it'll help a lot. Or at least help on some sort of scale.
Well, in the arts, anything can be politicized, but I think the arts gives a way for people to come together, to be inspired, to be a little uncomfortable, and to share the experience together where they are participants from, the aisle, but they're not directly involved, so they don't have to take the risk. And I think that's true for like music, movies. You almost get to vicariously live through another experience, and to be able to tell those stories from all those walks of life, I think is huge. Something you touched on about the big arts communities learning from the small. There's a great KRS-One quote, and I love this. I'm going to butcher it a little bit. Najee Concept brought it up in our discussion, but it was essentially, if the old people do not learn from the young people, then the old people will move slow amongst their circles. If the young people do not learn from the old people, from some of that wisdom, they too will move slow amongst their circles, right? So it's that knowledge going up and down and having cross-generational conversations about that. So I see the same thing happening, right? So it's kind of like when you get into big urban areas, the path forward in those big arts is it's almost like one directional. And then there's a lot of competition for little nuances. But when you get a fresh perspective that comes from people who are building it out of nothing, well, they have all the risk that they can take because they're not risking, oh my gosh, this is like Roger and Hammerstein, we're going to go down the crapper if we like all of a sudden start taking a risk. Yeah. So like seeing like a group like Wolfbane come out and see what they're doing. And also I think, and this is my goal with what I'm doing with these conversations, and I see a benefit also from what you're doing, is you're creating a catalog of all different types of examples of how people are doing this in their community. And then what it does is it gives other people permission to do the same thing.
Yeah, and to be brave. I'll share really fast, I think, kind of two stories along those lines that I've gotten from my time, which has also given me bravery here when we do something. So one thing that ended up, so I'm on the board for the Virginians for the Arts, which is basically the lobbying organization for state arts funding here in Virginia. And so I'm, kind of plugged into this statewide network, and ended up on my radar that one of the board members who who's there is involved in this organization in Orange, Virginia, and they ended up in the national news. Speaking of drag, because they offered a class. It was called Build a Babe, and it was a drag class that taught basically how to do drag, and it was kind of a costume makeup class. And for adults, by the way, too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if a child wanted to take it, it would have probably been fine too. But regardless, it was for adults. Anyway, it kind of blew up, and they had these kind of firebrand conservatives on the county commission. And so I reached out to them and I interviewed them a few months after it and things had settled a little bit. And the big thing that I learned was that actually by standing their ground, they were actually stronger for it. They ended up. The financial implications were fine because they ended up garnering more funding because people came to their defense.
Sure.
Secondarily, the people that were upset didn't engage with them anyway. So it didn't really – these are people that are really largely isolated in their homes on keyboards.
Keyboard warriors.
Yeah. And that's really what they were. They weren't actually showing up in real time in real space. These are actually cowards. They're not people that are actually engaged in the community in a healthy manner.
Yeah.
I mean, they may end up finding their way onto a city council seat or having some sort of platform on Living in Lynchburg or something to speak to, but they're not actually people that are actually doing things. And so when you're in real space in real time and actually doing the work, it tends to be that you're going to be okay. These people are going to make some noise online, and it can be scary. And I'm not saying that online noise doesn't sometimes manifest itself in real life.
Of course.
Because it can. But they found actually that they really were not under real threat, and that if they just stayed the course. And then the second thing is, you brought up Wolfbane. I always like to refer to Dustin, the founder of Wolfbane, as Jeans Boy.
Jeans Boy.
Jeans Boy. And the reason I call him Jeans Boy is because Dustin's father, is a small town, and he had an auto mechanic shop, and it's Gene, and everybody knew Gene, and everybody knew Jeans Boy Dustin. And so when Dustin, an openly gay man, and his husband decided to set up and do a theater company in Appomattox, Virginia.
Which is tiny.
Tiny, and if anybody wants to look up the voting demographics of that, you'd be like, what the hell is he doing there? Which again, I think it's much more complicated, right? When you look at these voting maps, it's a much more complicated story than you see in the map. He's been accepted there. They've been accepted there. He's Jeans Boy. He's not some scary person trying to, as maybe they've been told, violate children or something. These are just two nice people who have decided to do art. Not only that, bring a major economic boost to the community.
Right.
That's supporting a number of small businesses in and around, creating an identity for the community that's really clear and specific.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, there is bravery, I think, in operating in these spaces. And quite frankly, you're facing a lot more of the storm than someone in a safer urban environment where everybody agrees. But you also find very often that it's not nearly as scary as you may think it may be.
Well, no. I mean, my goodness, what the brain can come up with in terms of fear casting.
Totally.
The scary monster in your closet is always just your coat. Just go turn on the light.
Yeah.
Or if there is something, you will face it. You will learn how to deal with it. I love that we're sitting in this room and you have an MLK quote, "The time is always right to do what is right." And so I think that's a big takeaway for a lot of people of what you're doing, of what Wolfbane, what you and Ashley are doing together, is you're doing what's right in your heart. And you're going, you know what? It's going to be tough. It's going to be scary. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, and it is scary. And I won't lie. Like, we released the big gay dance party yesterday,
which we are extremely excited about because I have 6-inch rainbow platform boots that will be coming out with my bedazzled hat and my bejeweled glasses.
Perfect. Yeah, and there's a moment when I look at it and I'm like, is there going to be some noise? And there will be.
Of course.
But, it goes away. Nobody remembers it. And when we turn around and, we have Ricky Skaggs, a month later or whatever, who is known to be, pretty conservative and our conservative city council members are here seeing the show or whatever. Nobody remembers. Everybody moves on. It just is. It's so, and that's the other thing about this moment, right? It's scary because it's online, but it also is so ephemeral. It just pops up and it disappears and it was like it was never there. I mean, it is hot. It runs super, super hot, and then it's just gone.
Yeah.
And we haven't really found any, and some of it's maybe the culture that we built and the messaging that we use. And I'm not saying that our story's over here. I mean, we could certainly find our way into some sort of hotter water as things move forward. The other thing that we have here, and I'm not super happy about this, but we have very little local government funding. So there's not really much that the government side can do to us. There's not really a threat of money pulling. I mean, we've had to kind of figure this out on our own, which I don't actually think is sustainable, but it still is a part of the story. Now, the corporate community is much more important to us. So sure. They are really critical to our health and existence. But so far, they don't seem to really care. I mean, part of the identity that we've created is like, listen, we've got something for everybody. So the flip side of that is that, yes, there's going to be a big gay dance party, but you know what? There's also going to be this Mary and Martha religious dance thing that's happening, 2 weeks prior in the theater. One of my favorite moments here at the Academy was a day that we had a drag brunch, and I went down to the drag brunch, and there were drag queens everywhere, dollar bills flying all over the place. And
such a fun time.
Yeah, and it was in the Warehouse Theater, and I left the Warehouse Theater to go up to the Historic Theater because there was a show happening up there, and it was the opera was doing a matinee. So I went up, and I get off the elevator, and I've walked into the middle of a prayer circle that a group of Liberty University music students are having prior to their rehearsal. And the juxtaposition of those two things happening in the space, and also they were coexisting on this campus at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, were they intermingled? That would be the ideal, right?
Sure.
But we're not there yet. But at the very least, if everybody can kind of respect each other's space and time and means of expression, then I'm good. You can pray here if you want to. You can espouse your belief system as long as it's not hurting anybody else.
Correct.
And we'll give you the space and time for that. And then you can't call me a hypocrite.
No.
And that's really at the end of the day what we try to do.
Well, and I love the fact that you do provide space for everybody, right? And what I've noticed here is that, listen, people from the rainbow community, honestly have a right to be very vocal, very outspoken, like what are you doing, and really defend themselves. But what I've seen here is there'll be some flashes of that, but then it comes back to see me, hear me, understand me. Yeah. And so by providing a platform where people can do that, because the first step is exposure. What you don't know, again, your mind fears, and so you start painting the picture, but getting actually to know somebody and see them up and in person is huge, and I love that.
And that's really the thing, right? And it is actually, I think small communities are spaces where healing can happen, but we have to be, given the time. And also, quite frankly, I think going back to sort of what I hope for some of the rural conversation having a bigger platform, which I appreciate this podcast, is that I think also sometimes the left in large urban markets aren't helping the left in smaller communities.
No. And
it is how it's sometimes we're depicted, and then B, it's also, I think, and granted, I think the right takes advantage of certain things, as the left does too, right? It's like we're going to look at the most extreme sign at the Trump rally.
Right.
And we're going to say that that's the people in rural communities. And then we're going to go to Columbia University right now, and we're going to find the most extreme, poster.
Yeah.
And we're going to say that that's what, the academic left is doing. And so I think it neither side is helping the other side in sort of how it's characterized. And the truth is that it's really, both are really complex.
Yeah.
And I don't think until you're kind of immersed in it do you really understand that.
But they're also not helping, quite honestly, their own side.
Yeah.
Because by sitting there and sticking your fingers in your ear and be like, la, 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 it's like, do you know how exhausting that is? versus actually just embracing the entire picture.
Yeah.
And like we keep saying, having conversations. And something that I've thought about. Did you ever see the show Different Strokes?
Oh yeah.
And the theme song.
Yeah.
The world doesn't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some. And when I did the California AIDS ride, it's a fundraiser for AIDS research and treatment, and it's a 7-day ride, 545 miles from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And when they get all the riders together, they say, ride your own ride. And what they're saying is, there's going to be stronger riders out there. Don't kill yourself trying to keep up. Like, you just operate within here. But I saw a larger message in that too, which means, and let others do the same.
That's great, yeah.
Because you would have strong riders kind of getting all annoyed at the slow riders who were in front of them, like, why didn't they do blah, blah. It's like, ride your own ride.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Well, in Ashley's conversation, we did talk a lot about choosing Lynchburg. Mm-hmm. So we don't need to dive down that particular path in general. But as somebody who was basically raised in Amherst, which for listeners is literally just over the James River from Lynchburg, what have you seen as the most dramatic change? Because people credit you, Ashley, and others, but the two of you specifically as helping really turn this place around. And when I say turn this place around, injecting it, making downtown not scary, vibrant, and up and coming business community, also the arts, and for making it feel like there's inclusivity for everybody. What would you say was the point when you started to see that dramatic change, and was it during your time here?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm struck. Before we started recording, we were talking about our new puppy, and it's somewhat like. People keep coming to the house occasionally, like, oh man, he's grown so much. And I'm like, I don't have a perspective on that. I guess he has, yeah. And then I'll look back at a video or picture, be like, oh, he actually has grown. I think it's probably more like that. I think we're in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of it, so it's hard to always have a sense of that progression. I do think when we first started producing the in-station summer theater festivals out here, we really did view ourselves as being something that was in the mountains of Virginia. So it wasn't so much Lynchburg that we were really looking at but inevitably what ended up happening was Lynchburg was the primary audience base because it was the biggest population center. So we kind of found our way over here over time. But I remember, we had all these actors from out of town in, and we would, very often go to this restaurant bar called Bull Branch that no longer exists.
Oh yeah.
And that time, Bull Branch, and what it meant to people, to have this sort of downtown inclusive bar. Particularly we had a lot of LGBTQ folks that were a part of our cast and team, and it was a space that they felt safe in, and I think seeing that was really a seed that something more was possible and that there was something to water. But it has come with, at points too, moments of compromise. Like, our organization has to be an organization that is provides value to the community it serves. I think we identified that there was a community of people here that did not feel like they were part of it. And so I think that we probably fostered and began to build upon that. And that, I think, in turn sort of widened the scope of who the community was and how we looked at who we were. I think now that I'm part of the establishment here at the Academy, I wrestle with stuff still. I do. I there's sometimes I want to go faster. I want to do more, or there may be things that I'm personally interested in, but I know I can't do here because the community we wouldn't have enough people that would gravitate it or do it. I mean, my own personal taste is pretty avant-garde and out there. So, I do. I internally very often say, listen, the way that one of the successes of running an arts organization in this moment here in a smaller community is that we really do. We have to be valuable to the community. So that means that the community has to see value in it, and so it has to be a reflection of the community in some sort of way. So that meant that we were going to reflect some of the community that was marginalized, and that this would be a space that was going to do that. At the same time, too, we also have to speak to the status quo at points. And so because the status quo also is a part of this community, and they need to feel valued as well. So, we do a lot of status quo stuff that's not necessarily my thing. If you looked at the Academy's programming, it's not like, oh, that's, Jeff's voice.
Right.
The only thing that is me is that I'm like, hey, we're going to try to embrace who we are and what we are. And that's sometimes the stuff that I'm not really all that into, Bart. I'll be honest with you. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a hip hop head, so we'll do some hip hop. I mean, it's funny. We're in the midst right now of trying to negotiate bringing Juvenile here, and we will make sacrifices for that because we recognize, particularly the Black members of our staff and team, and then my own aesthetic and desires. We recognize that there is a desire for that to come here. It financially makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
So we are going to completely lose our shirts on it. But we're also like, yeah, but if we do this, then we're staying true to a segment of the community that is not being served right now. And but in turn, they're going to get Del McCoury Band and bluegrass, and they're going to get Tanya Tucker, and all this stuff is going to coexist here. It's going to live here together.
Well, I like that you take risks, but you also provide kind of a safe foundation, right? Like it's not all risk, because that can be too much. And that is something that is big, because I noticed, like when we went to the Bright Nights Festival, and it's like weird comments, and sometimes they make it into Instagram, but people saying, man, I love when Lynchburg doesn't feel like Lynchburg.
Yeah, that's the thing we hear all the time. People walk into the theater. They say it all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's such an interesting comment.
It is, and it's not to say that what was before, right? Because you don't want to necessarily like disparage what was before, because nostalgia can be a powerful drug, and when it feels like, oh, we're just, and this is the thing with what we talk about, like the extreme liberal left, tear it all down. And it's oh, hold on now. I understand where your heart is going, evolution, but you talked about wanting to go fast, like that speed. You gotta kind of go more of a rhythm of nature on that one.
Yeah, and I do think too. I will share on the flip side. So we were just talking about Ricky Skaggs. Ricky Skaggs, I think at points has been kind of an outspoken Trump supporter, and we've booked him a couple times. And a colleague of mine who I have a deep friendship with and care about a lot. And we talk every 2 weeks. He runs the Jefferson Center in Roanoke, Virginia, which is a comparable organization, comparable size city. He won't book him because of that. And we did. And I that might be right there who we are. When Ricky Skaggs doesn't, it's not a political event. Ricky Skaggs doesn't get up on stage and say, you need to do X, Y, or Z politically.
Sure.
But this is a part of who he is. Does that mean that I lock him out of the building and that somehow, I think that would be really hypocritical.
It would.
And so, but there is danger in that space sometimes too, on the flip side for us. I think it where something will happen, and particularly if there's something of a religious nature happening. But that's just where we are. Well, going back to the disparaging thing, I have a weird relationship to those comments about, man, I can't believe this is Lynchburg. Sometimes it feels really good to hear that, because I will share with you, I did not like this place at all growing up. I actually might have, I think dislike, I'll just say dislike. I disliked it. And growing up in Amherst County, in North Amherst too, so the furthest part of the county from the city.
Okay.
I did not view myself as being from Lynchburg. I viewed myself as being from Amherst County. We would sometimes go to Charlottesville for things, and definitely looked at Lynchburg as not having much. There were the sort of the liberty things that were with it. And I did not think much of it. I even will share that when we first moved to the area, I did not view myself as living in Lynchburg. Again, we were the mountain festival. We were this thing that was, we were more connected in some ways to Nelson County and the mountains of Nelson and the breweries and the vineyards and all that than we really were the city of Lynchburg. So there's a part of me that takes great pride when I hear, oh, this is not, because it is. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to redefine this. We're going to redefine how people view where they live and what it is, and that it has value and it's interesting and exciting, and we're going to do that. There's another part of me though too that's like, yeah, but wait a second. Like, we need to probably figure out how we can take pride in who we are and what we are. And that's been my own kind of personal journey in living here is I think is seeing the good in it and finding the good, and the good that existed prior to anything that we did.
Right.
There definitely is stuff that's really good that exists prior
Absolutely.
to us. And so I think that has been an interesting, and when people say, I can't believe I'm in Lynchburg, they're standing in a theater that was built in 1905. This is not right. This is not new. This is old, actually, ladies and gentlemen. Right. So
it's just refreshed.
Yeah. It's polishing off something and or polishing something up and helping people see that they're not. It's not lost.
No, and again, kudos to you, to the board, for including everybody and recognizing what was done before. So when I hear these comments, they're always with a sense of wonder and joy and a smile on the face. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to put that part in there because, like I said, there is a watch out when new things come along that people think, oh, all the old is now going to be trash and it was worthless, and there's a sense of like loss of identity. It's like, no, what we're doing is we're just putting more aisles in the grocery store and just expanding the grocery store for everybody. So that's the big takeaway I'm getting from a lot of what you do.
Well, and there's our value statement that certainly includes inclusivity, but sometimes too, we will simply point back to the free market, which is sometimes hard for a conservative to push back on if they really do espouse to be conservative. Exactly. Because they're basically, listen, like you don't have to come to this thing. Like you decide what you spend your money on, and that's so don't come. If you don't want to be there, don't come. I think, just like the aisles in the supermarket, you can choose to buy one thing over the other thing. And so that's what we're going to be. You can, then don't come to that, but come to Ricky Skaggs.
Yeah, exactly.
That's up to you.
Well, cool. I think this is a great point to wrap things up. Let me ask you 2 silly popcorn questions.
Sure.
And then we'll get into one that's going to kind of wrap this out as a future focused thing. So I did reach out to some people to see if there's any comments or questions, and a lot of, again, major credit to you and to Ashley as the power couple that have turned around downtown Lynchburg and really brought a fresh perspective on what Lynchburg can be. So that was that one. Another one I got was, it's an either or question. Mm-hmm. On one side of the road at an auditorium, you have Wu-Tang Clan performing live. Uh-huh. On the other side of the road is the final championship of Premier League. Oh, man. You can only pick one to attend. Which one would you go to?
Well, definitely Wu-Tang, because my team is probably not in the championship. So that's my team is the Tottenham Hotspurs, and they are. If anybody's an NFL fan, they're like the Cincinnati Bengals. They occasionally get kind of in the playoffs, and you think they might make it, but in the end, they never get there. So definitely Wu-Tang, because I'm guaranteed to see what I want to see.
Awesome. And I'll tell you off mic who that came from. Would you ever host the Docksiders again? And I'll tell you a story about that. Yeah. So we had just landed here, and we're walking around in our new hometown, and we see over off Percival's Island, hey, there's going to be the Docksiders. They're coming. I'm like, Docksiders, this looks like yacht rock. Now, in San Francisco, Mustache Harbor is a local yacht rock band, and we loved going to it. Like, Amy would dress up as Goldie Hawn from Overboard, with this full sequin outfit, sailor's hats, everything. We're going in there, and we're always and we're always pretty much like the oldest people there. So when we arrived here, we're like, oh, this is great. And we dressed up in our outfits and we come walking over, and this was down at the club of the academy. Yeah. And I was like, this is interesting. I don't see anybody dressed up, and B, we are definitely the youngest people here. And so I go walking in and I see like, okay, how's this place set up? Okay, right. You got standing cocktail tables. God. Okay, we're just going to make the most of this. And then we get our wine and we're having fun. And then all of a sudden, I see all these chairs being trucked in, and I'm like, what in the world is going on here? And luckily, there was still standing room at the front, and we found these gals. They had a table. They were dressed up. We're like, we're going to hang out here with you. And I go out after the music's coming on, and I go to get another glass of wine, and I feel this tap on my shoulder. And this young lady says, what is your name? And I said, it's Bart, quickly. And she said, I'm Ashley. And I said, oh. And I won't go into the full tirade of what the not disparagement, but the bewilderment about what was happening inside the theater. And she said, Jeff won't even go in.
That's right. She's right. I wouldn't go in.
So I implore you, try again. Bring the Docksiders back. It was a fun time.
Yeah, that's a great example of where you are and where the community is. For me too. Completely ironic. Absolutely tongue in cheek. The band too, by the way, thinks of themselves as completely ironic and tongue in cheek.
Well, they were great. They were super professionals. Yeah. They had some comments, like the lead singer was like, I got to be honest, this is the most amount of chairs I've seen in one of my shows before, but they brought it.
Yeah. And so we, as a team here, and we're a relatively young staff, we got it. We got the joke, and we got the whole thing. And even been to yacht rock style things before. And we thought, oh, this would be great. This would be a fun thing to do down the warehouse. We're always trying to figure out how to program the warehouse. But you can't, we could probably have figured it out maybe to some degree, but we're not monitoring the age of ticket buyers. So
right.
And it was an audience that showed up because they took it seriously. They took the music from that era 100% seriously. They were there because they loved that music, and it was their music from their past. And they were old, and they were going to sit down and listen to it and take it really seriously. And I think it was this moment where we're like, wow, this is a time where I can't. And I think my major discomfort actually was the fact that it wasn't aligned. It wouldn't have been necessarily because that audience was at something, or because it was literally just because it was misaligned, and I didn't want to exist in that discord, because I like to align things correctly. We want the right audience at the right thing, so I will take your encouragement and consider doing it again, but it might be a while.
Well, and maybe there's some ways to how it gets positioned on what this is.
Yeah, I think we would consider doing it again under a context of which it was a specific function or event that we knew that the alignment would be correct.
Yeah.
I think that by just sort of opening it up to the public,
right?
We are sort of subjecting ourselves to. And I think the other thing it taught me was that again, it's about majority. It wasn't that you all were the only ones there that were expecting to have a yacht rock night. There were other people about it too.
Oh, sure.
Thought like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna walk into this thing. I'm gonna be dancing, having fun. It's totally tongue in cheek. And they walk in there, and they're also like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah.
And they were just outnumbered. They were completely outnumbered.
And so what people don't understand, yacht rock is basically soft rock from the 70s and 80s, and people dress up in basically like as if you're on a yacht. You got your captain's hat, you got your Hawaiian shirt, and you're just singing along and lighting your lighter and just being silly. So anyway, that was when I knew I was going to be talking to you. I was like, I am going to save this till the end.
Culture's so funny.
Yeah. All right. So here's a closeout question for you. If you could fast forward to another point in life, let's call it, we could say it's retirement. You've moved on. You've left the area. What would you like to look back upon and smile the most about the impact you made through the Academy Center of the Arts here in Lynchburg?
I think it probably is gonna be oriented around youth. I think this period has been fatherhood for me. So I think one of the things that I reflect on a lot are the children here. And it doesn't mean just the children's youth programming. I think it's also the environment in which they're in. And I think that I'll probably be most proud of I think broadening the definition of for these kids of where they live and what's possible. That they have a venue and a space and an organization like this. And it'll mean different things to them at different points in their life. And for my own son, it means different things at different points. One of the greatest things for me is my son Theo getting to participate here. So, tomorrow night he's going to come with me. We have a rental down the hill, Dusty Circus, and he's going to come with me then. And then he's going to come with me Thursday night to see Outrageous. And he's performing in theater camps now. So he's doing shows here, and I watch him, and I watch his peers, and I watch his friends, and I was really lucky growing up. I had even at Sweetbriar, there was they had this thing called the Babcock season. They don't have it anymore, but they used to bring in about 4 or 5 kind of national touring things every year. And I got to see like Bill T. Jones dance troupe, and I got to see National Theater of the Deaf, and I got to see the Juilliard Acting Company, and and we traveled to see stuff too. But I had this exposure to this stuff, and the world was just a lot bigger and more expansive for me. And I think that we have last week, and then this week we have multiple school groups coming to see daytime performances, and they get to walk into that theater, and they get to see. Last week they got to see performers from Australia and Japan and South America, I think that will be, because no matter what, like those kids are going to grow up and they're going to go on into the world and do stuff, and I think there's always somewhat of an ephemeral part of all this thing that we do. Sometimes I take comfort in it. Sometimes it's also an existential crisis. But that's what I'll hold on to, because that lives on. And even the Fine Arts Center that used to exist here, that I used to do some stuff with my dad at, still means a ton to me and had a big influence on me today. It's not there anymore, but it doesn't mean that it didn't have impact on me or didn't do something. So I think that will be probably what I'll be most proud of. And that, my kid will know later down the road too. He'll know, like, oh yeah, dad and mom did these things, and they did at a time that was really heated and difficult. They brought a drag brunch to Lynchburg, Virginia, and I'll be proud of that.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you and Ashley are doing, not only for your son Theo, but for the community. It does leave a mark, and I'm glad to get a sense that you do receive that. Yeah.
I think that there is, I think in a small town too, one of the things that is sometimes tough is that there can be greater weight on us with, the responsibility to is a little heavy sometimes, because I think in a larger market, you're one of many in a big ecosystem. So it's like, if you go away, it's not like, and my ego is not big enough that I think that like this wouldn't continue on without me, because it would. But I do think there is I'll sort of add that too. I think that there is sort of an added pressure of when something doesn't go well, or it's not exactly the way you want it to be, that the stakes seem higher. But it's also really rewarding, because you get to feel it and see it in a way that's really direct, which is nice.
And again, back to why we chose to come to a small town. The whole point.
Well, welcome. We appreciate you being here. I think it's
thank you.
It's a good story to tell, and your appreciation of this place needs to be heard.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Hey, everyone, before you bounce on out of here, if you enjoyed this conversation or are a fan of the show, please consider sharing it. A personal recommendation goes a long way. And if you believe in the power of inspiring stories like the one you heard, then giving it to somebody else is a way of expanding that message and putting this out there into the universe, so that other people can see a possibility for creating their vision of a passionate, meaningful life and being a contribution in the world. And I say amen. I think we need some more of that. And if you would like to become an ambassador of the show, head on over to patreon.com small town secret sauce. And for as little as a cup of coffee a month, you too can elevate the conversation. And as always, and until next time, please, please, please keep those passions lit.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Town Big Arts. Remember to rate and review us and share with your friends. To learn more, visit us at smalltownbigarts.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Geoffrey Kershner.